You're telling me that you just made up all these lies because that's what people wanted to hear. To me, that means you're capping on the culture for the money.
The context is that at some point in this Young Thug trial, the whole YSL trial, rap lyrics are starting to be used as evidence, potentially damning evidence against rappers who, and we can talk, I mean, that's a whole can of worms. But this is a crazy legal precedent to set, given that a lot of the music we listen to, a lot of the rap music we listen to was storytelling music. Nobody in their right mind. I mean, Bill O'Reilly did when he brought KRS-One onto his show, but nobody thought KRS-One's songs were autobiographical for the most part. And one of the songs that Bill O'Reilly brought up, I remember, was that guy's a moron. It was 100 Guns, 200 Clips. In that song, KRS-One goes to prison for gun running at the end. That didn't happen in real life. It doesn't take a genius to understand that. It doesn't take a genius to understand that, a lot of artists who have songs about, story, so like everyone from King Von to Immortal Technique, they tell stories in their music. Sometimes the narrator dies in the story. How could they die if they're rapping the story? You know what I mean? So it's setting a dangerous precedent on the socio-political side of the spectrum, which is too big of a can of worms now. But on the other side of the spectrum, just in terms of creativity, suddenly that is all eliminated. And now the criminal justice system has branded rap music as 100% autobiographical, and therefore, in my opinion, far less creative than it actually is.
So I don't know where Aaron sits on this, but I disagree, because I think artists are different. You can't paint all of rap music with the same brush, right? I don't think, a lot of fans believe these artists are real, and that's the appeal. Especially if that's what they're saying, like, I'm the realist, this is what, it's artist by artist, right? Like, if you were just to play me Slick Rick's song, he basically is telling a story. Yeah. How many artists are like really like storytelling like that though? I feel like the storytelling is less, there's not as many good storytelling songs these days that are obviously storytelling. I think a lot of these artists are coming from environments and telling on themselves in the music, like giving very specific details. Like, some of these aren't made up stories. So I'm not saying that you can never say that all rap music is, non-fictional or fictional. So I think it has to be on a case-by-case basis, because some of these artists are claiming that they are who they are. And if you tell me you are who you are, and then years later, now you're telling me, actually, I wasn't that. Like, what is it? I think it's just case by case, because, I think a lot of artists, just like a lot of artists go on Vlad and tell on themselves. It's the same thing. Like, they doing the same thing in their music.
Yeah, I think like somebody like Jay-Z wouldn't be Jay-Z if people didn't believe his stories. And I'm not saying they're real or fake, but to the degree that he artfully tells those things, you know what I'm saying? The assumption is that you would at least hope he's being truthful with most of it, and maybe it's cosplaying, which is what Fat Joe is saying. He's essentially cosplaying a gangster, which to me, growing up, I have to be honest, like I started in the rock industry and I'm from Atlanta. But one of my biggest grievances was that I just felt like a lot of, like, either you were really actually a violent person or you were fake. And neither of those things sat right with me as a woman. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like, I really started really enjoying hip hop in Atlanta from like Outkast. Obviously, Outkast is super innovative, but like Andre 3000 was talking about stuff that didn't have to do with violence or like womanizing. You know what I'm saying? And then when Soldier Boy came up, Soldier Boy was having fun. It was like rap didn't have to be violent or like grotesque, you know? But my brother was like a big 3-6 Mafia fan, and I just couldn't get into their music because the way that they spoke about me. So for me, I do feel like when like so like Future has like several times said like if I actually did as many drugs as I rapped about, I wouldn't be here to tell the story. So I get that there's embellishment in music, and I think that that is a part of the storytelling is embellishment. But to come online as a grown man and say I lied about 90% of the stuff I said is crazy to me. I'm gonna just be honest. Like that's a very strange statement for me to be like to hear an adult man say my whole career was just I understand that writers and directors and like I understand that it's storytelling, but the hope is that you take a story from what you've lived, from your lived experience, and then you shape it around that. Or even like, yeah, you see something like in the KRS-One situation. My assumption is that he saw a lot of it, like, you know what I'm saying? Like he saw a lot of it, so he's able to tell the story. But I do find it to be disconcerting, just from my perspective, that people are essentially saying I'm lying about everything I'm talking about. However, I understand it to a degree because it's like if you grow up in this environment and maybe you got out as the rapper, but all of your homies are still in it, now you become the herald or the storyteller for the experiences. So to a degree, I do understand some of that, but like Lil Baby's documentary, it's one of my favorite hip hop documentaries that's come out recently. This man really lived this life to the point where P and Coach K were like, yo, like, we understand that at 18, you're making millions upon millions, but you have a future and you have a good heart. Come into the studio. Do you know what I'm saying? So, like, for me, Lil Baby, I don't believe at all is involved in that lifestyle because I know he doesn't even live on the West Side anymore. I don't, so like him talking about, but even for him, he's out of that environment now. His lyrics have changed and he's talking about more progressive things and other things. And he references back to those things. For me to hear from somebody like Fat Joe, again, I don't want to focus on the case that's going on because that's just who knows. But for Fat Joe to say, I just was lying all of this time as a fan of hip hop and as a fan of somebody who, I won't say that I'm a Fat Joe fan, no disrespect to him. Like everybody wants to do the lean back. That was tight. You know what I'm saying? But like in my head, Fat Joe could have just been doing lean back songs. That's the stuff that hit. Like you're telling me that you just made up all these lies because that's what people wanted to hear. To me, that means you're capping on the culture for the money, which is again disconcerting. As a Black woman in America, we're getting painted as this whole thing because you decided that you wanted to lie in your music. I feel like that creates so much of an interesting dynamic that can really be dangerous. And then if you're lying about lying, I'm really questioning your character now. Like if you're just saying that so that it looks good on the part of the people who are being prosecuted, then I'm also very concerned about your thought process. So I don't know. The Fat Joe comments to me were wild, just like strange. Like I would never want to date or marry any type of man like that.
When the comparison to television and film is wild to me because it's completely different. Like the fans' expectations for the most super fans' expectations of these artists, they become super fans because a lot of times they love the music, obviously, but like there's something in their experience that they're really connecting with, right? Especially in this self-medicating era, like when all these artists are talking about self-medicating, drugs, things like that. That's having a real impact on a lot of people's lives. And I think even worsening situations in communities all across the country. Like the fans of artists aren't looking at artists the same way they're looking at Goodfellas or, you know, any other movie that they're watching. I
Are
hate
you
when
saying
artists,
right now or like across history?
I mean, the fans of artists are looking at their artist different than fans of whatever movie you're talking about. I don't like when that artists to me bring up movies and it's like a cop out, right? There's the fan connection with a movie to me is different than the fan connection with an artist, right? When I go watch a movie, it's very clear that this is a movie. Like I pay it's I go to the theater. I know that there was a director. I know that these are actors. Like I don't think fans think their artists that they listen to are actors. I
I
don't think
like I didn't listen to Billie Jean and think that Michael Jackson was actually talking about a woman he was in love with or not in love with named Billie Jean. That's what I'm saying. I feel like hip hop is different than like potentially other genres.
yeah, but how many? I feel like the art of storytelling not has completely been lost, but we're not telling as many stories in music as they used to. I mean, there's some. I'm not. Again, it's you can't paint all of music with the same brush. There are probably artists that are telling beautiful stories, but I don't think. I think that a lot of today's hip hop artists have become popular because they're so real and because we buy into their lyrics because we believe they're living exactly. I mean, that was 50's appeal. I mean, he really got shot. He got, that's a lot of people came to love him because of his story and his authenticity. I
Like
don't.
even Kanye through the wire, he's rapping through the
Yeah.
wire and you're like, "Yo, what?"
The authenticity of these artists plays a huge role in the fandom. Now, to then say I was lying in a shitload of my music is ridiculous, and then to compare it to movies, I just can't. That comparison to me always throws me off, and it's typically a cop out when an artist, to me, in my opinion, is typically a cop out because it's different. To me, it's very different.
I actually disagree with both of you. Fat Joe, one of his most iconic songs was with Pun, and in that song they do a mafia hit. Obviously that didn't happen. It's still a classic record. So looking at the whole of his career, looking at the era he has thrived in, which I guess realistically is every era. He's a rarity in that regard. But pardon me. But he, I think, is an example of a lot of factors at once. So you brought up how Lil Baby was involved in criminal activity and then changed. As far as I know, I would apply that same statement to Fat Joe, given especially all the information known about Terror Squad. People speak more freely about Big Pun's past criminal activity because he's deceased. You can't really get him on that. The whole Terror Squad was, I don't need to litigate that.
Well, then why say I'm lying versus I used to be a part of that and then I'm writing stories from that era? To me, that's two completely different things.
The
Well,
stories
because
about
the conversation. Go ahead, Dan.
man.
No, I was saying that the relevance of his statement about lying comes along with the timing of these legal precedents being set. My guess is he doesn't want them being set. I still think it's a dangerous precedent because say someone like Fat Joe, right? His nickname is Crack. Say he used to sell drugs. I don't know what the statute of limitations is on that, but could he be used as an example to get another artist who's trying to get out of a bad situation convicted of something? Could he be used? Could his lyrics potentially? Since now, if rap music is a confession, right? We have to look at the whole now. I don't think it's going to be. We know how legal precedents work, and it's often not equally enforced, nor is it applied in logical ways. So if Fat Joe, let's just say that there were a case years ago, Fat Joe just sold some crack, but he's rapping. Now he's in trouble because his lyrics are being used against him. Part and parcel with that, could they use the lyrics in the song with Big Pun and say, it also appears that you shot a man while he was eating pasta? You know what I mean? So where do you draw the line? If he's clearly storytelling in one, but not in the other,
So, so
how does the court system interpret that?
I don't think that a lyric should be like a slam the door, like it's an open shut case because he said this in a song. However, if an artist is like, yo, rolling down the street in this blue car on South 52nd, that's where I'm if I'm a detective or a lawyer, I'm following those breadcrumbs for sure to see if there's something there, because a lot of artists these days will go into that much specificity about their illegal activities. So I don't think that just because you hear it in a song, like that's evidence that they did it. To me, it's a possible breadcrumb that I'm going to follow and be like, okay, but yeah, I don't think that just because somebody said something in a, I don't, hopefully that's, I mean, people hear what they want to hear on our podcast. They're going to take it. They're going to take whatever they feel like they should hear and just create something. So I'm not saying that you should be able to just take a lyric and be like, oh yeah, he did it because he said it in a song. I just think that a lot of artists are leaving breadcrumbs that are very real in these songs, and I have no problem with detectives or lawyers using those breadcrumbs. Like,
Well, I think that's already happening. I think the difference here is that there's an actual legal change, because there have been cases where recording artists who aren't famous, and lo and behold, they are all rappers, it seems, have gotten convicted in part because they've included information that only a participant in that crime would know in one of their songs. I think what's also dangerous is that we're once again in a time in hip hop culture where the term real means to a lot of people being criminally involved. And I think that's precarious for us to accept, you know.
I'm with you, Payne. I understand the legal precedence part. I'm not, because I think it's terrible how they're using their lyrics to be like X, Y, and Z. I understand what Dame is saying, like you can follow the breadcrumbs, but I think that they're going above and beyond to try to put these people away because of, with this music as like such a big, like if you have other evidence and it's extremely compelling and this is one morsel, cool. But for y'all to be going line by line and trying to analyze stuff, and even looking at how they're analyzing stuff, it's like, that's not what that term means. Some of it is really funny how they're like changing the terms, but it's like,
yeah. But like, it's scary too, because what does this create?
The implications for other Black men who are rappers, I get it. So that's why I understand what you're saying about Fat Joe. I'm just saying it's disconcerting for him to stake his entire career on one interview just so it doesn't set legal precedents. Maybe don't do the interview, because for me that's crazy that you're willing to say like, oh, if you lied about all of it, I think that's crazy. If you're lying about all of it, I think that's crazy. So I feel like either way, it's like, and I get he's Fat Joe is like past that. He's already made his money. He's doing whatever. I just think that that's a bad look for hip hop in so many ways. I think it's a bad look for him as a person because it makes you question a lot of different things about him, and at least in my opinion.
If one of my favorite rappers came out and they were like, look, I lied about a lot of the majority of my music wasn't based in real life. I would just like to know more about what he meant. Someone saying like, I lied in all my in all the books I wrote, and I wrote books about science fiction, but I actually worked in a chemistry lab. Well, does that make me less authentic as a chemist? Well, no. It just means that I just created scenarios for the sake of what I'm writing in the art. So did Fat Joe, again, I don't know what he meant. I'm not going to pretend that I do, but it would also be dumb of him if he were involved in criminal activity to confess in every song and say, I killed this person, that's his name. maybe you write a song about violence because you've led a violent lifestyle, but you don't confess. I feel like that's a new thing in music where now people are more involved in communicating with real life adversaries through music. And and I think it's terrible because that a lot of young people are dying and going to prison because of that. But that really wasn't the era of music that we listened to growing up.
Yeah.
But I think
I'm not asking him to confess. That would be insane. I'm just saying him saying I lied in 90% of he could have been like, man, I'm a storyteller. I was taking experience from the street and stuff that I had seen and crafting. He could have, as a storyteller, I would have thought he would have told on himself in a more creative way. Homeboy literally said, I lied in 90% of my music, and they laughed. He was like, no, I'm being serious. I lied. His words. Like, as a creative, I'm not gonna say I lied if it was creative storytelling. That's my only issue with that. I'm not asking him to be like, yeah, I really did all of this. Da, 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 da. I don't want you to do that. I just feel like it's a weird statement for a man to say my whole career is a lie, essentially.
But the fact that a lot of young people are dying from very real beefs, a very real communication in these songs, lends some credibility to people that want to use some of these lyrics in court cases. So I think it's a case by case basis. You can't just take it at face value. I think you have to. It depends on the artist, depends on the song. You can't just say, okay, he said this, boom, put him in jail, whatever. But even on the I've actually called a couple artists out just personally, just talking to them. I'm like, yo, why you keep making all these sad songs? And I know you're not sad. Like, I know you're not in this space anymore. And they're like, well, that's what's resonating with the audience. And I get it, but a lot of this music has a very real impact on people, right? I feel like some of this music that encourages self-medication leads to more self-medication, more people dying, more people relying on drugs. And I feel like I'm in the camp of like, music has very real impact. So, it's frustrating to me when I see artists creating something that I know has a negative effect, and they're not even in that space anymore, just because it's working or it's streaming well. So it's just tough to see. I hate to see it, but yeah, stop telling on yourselves in these songs, man. Like, if you are a storyteller, like, brand that as, like, we knew that Slick Rick was a storyteller. Like, who is the modern day Slick Rick? Like, there's not that many good storytelling songs these days. Like, Hop had one. What was it called? What the hell was that shit called? He told a really dope story. It was a dope song. One of my favorite songs was from his, but I don't know why I'm drawing a blank. But it was clearly like who tells good story? Who has good storytelling songs? That's a question. Like, who has good storytelling songs today?
I think a lot of artists do. I just think that they're not super big, but like Caleb Mitchell, I think is a phenomenal storyteller. I think he tells his story and then he will tell other people's stories that he's been around. Like he has a song where he tells the story of a friend who ended up dying. Like he ended up dying because he lived in a rough neighborhood. The kid wasn't bad, but like I think a lot of artists are telling dope stories. I think even some of like, I don't think that mainstream music radio is pushing storytelling because
Yeah.
there's always something behind mainstream media. Like there's more dollars and cents and checkpoints that they're trying to make. They're not trying to edify the best art typically. Do you know what I'm saying? I think Summer Walker's a great storyteller. I think there's a lot of really cool storytellers.
I'm not asking that question because I'm telling you that none exists. I'm genuinely asking because I do feel like, along with like freestyling, like there's certain arts that happen a lot less. Like there's definitely artists that can still freestyle, but it's not something that's celebrated more widely. So it's not something that a lot of artists practice, right? You don't
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
you don't gain popularity for being a good freestyler these days. So less artists try to become great freestyle artists, right? And
Which I think if artists are watching this, if there is that vacuum filling it, is not a bad idea if that's what you want to do. I mean, if you suddenly become a great freestyler, well, guess what? The last 10 years, no one has really seen that. So if you are that, now you have an entirely new set of people's attentions to capture.
there is like that there's a white dude that's been doing it, but again, I'm calling him that white dude because I don't know his name, but he's dope
You
and he's
talking about
strong.
A Ward?
I don't even know. Again, I don't even know his name. I think he has glass. Does he have glasses? I've seen him on like a few like news. Like I think he might have even been on TNT.
You talking about the comedian, the guy that does stand up comedy and then freestyles during it?
Again, I don't know if he does. No, he definitely no. It's not comedy. Yeah, I don't know. I think he was on TNT one time when I was watching basketball, and he was freestyling. But yeah, I think a lot of arts get lost along the way because it's not as cool, or you can't really become popular. Because freestyling back in the day, like if you were dope, like a lot of people would learn about who you are because you were off the top with it, and freestyle meant not written, like just off the top, a beat comes on and you can rhyme and it sounds dope. And then the kind of like the definition of a freestyle kind of changed over time.
Now people get mad if you say a freestyle is off top. They're like, man, I wrote it, and it's like, man, when I was coming up with freestyle, man, you didn't write it. It just came off your head. But people will get upset if you say that they didn't freestyle if they wrote it.
Yeah. So I mean, I would like to find more artists that love telling stories, but I just don't think that. Again, like I don't. To me, movies is an obvious story unless it's even the ones that are based on a true story. Like the base is true, and then they just build a top of like a bunch of imaginary shit on top of the base, and then you lose.
I
Like
actually feel
Yeah,
like
but then,
movies are way more reality than they are fiction. Do you know what I'm saying?
say,
Because you're like basing them off of like personality types, people types. Then you're basing them about off like because there's so much realness in it. That's why we connect with it. You know what I'm saying? And then the stories are pieced together from a bunch of different people's stories. So I feel like movies to a degree. Like of course there's like I feel like movies are a lot more real than, especially when we start getting into these like the government owned movies or people going into hiding and stuff. I feel like those are a lot more real.
I mean, I think a movie is more of like, okay, let me spend 2 or 3 hours just kind of escape from stuff real quick, and then I snap back to reality right afterwards. Whereas you might put on a song to kind of, you start thinking about your boyfriend, or you start thinking about, I don't know.
well,
Stop
but there were
about yourself,
instances.
whether it's a Vlad interview or your songs. Stop putting real shit. Stop putting real shit in your music if that's the case, like because it doesn't sound like they're gonna stop. The lady, forget, I don't know if the DA or whoever, she said, you keep telling on yourself, we're gonna keep using it. So stop doing that shit. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like
Well, there have been situations where movies were blamed on, murders and other crimes, and that was something that they tried to litigate. And again, art imitates life.
I don't think it's just hip
Some,
hop too. I think the hip hop is more because you remember when Marilyn Manson was getting
yeah,
in trouble, and then there was all those like death metal bands in like Switzerland, and like folks was coming up missing, and they were like finding out. I don't know if y'all remember this. There was this one death metal band that was actually part of a cult, and like people ended up dying, and those dudes went to prison because one of them was actually part of the cult, but they were like making music about it. It was like in the early 2000s. I remember hearing about all that because I was big into like hardcore music and stuff like that. And my mom was like, you need to stop listening to that stuff. So I do think that it has happened before in other musical cases. I just think as soon as Black people got involved, they're like, oh, we about to change the whole court system.
exactly. That's my point. They're not using. I mean, they might occasionally extract a detail from a lyric if they really have a strong legal basis for doing so. But the YSL trial is different. Like you said, Aaron, they're fine tooth combing all these lyrics. And that's when my eyes start rolling, because I think, all right, number one, this is stupid. And number two, it's setting a dangerous legal precedent. And then number three, there are so many fans out there. Like, granted, there are the fans out there that listen to music that they relate to. I'd say, statistically speaking, I would bet money that the majority of fans who listen to violent music, music about whatever it is, surviving a dangerous environment, that kind of thing, they're not from there. They just enjoy it. It's like the people that love watching Godfathers. Hey, bro, you're not a fucking gangster. You're not in the mob. You just like that movie. Now you put the posters on your wall. It's like all these dudes that are going online and they're like, well, King Von's the realest killer in the Chirac. Like, you're not even from there. So there is a lot of fantasy going on, but those fans end up going online and, fueling that fire and reaffirming this notion that if you're not a rapper who's actually killing people in real life, you shouldn't rap about violence. Or if you're not really selling drugs in real life, you shouldn't rap about it. And I think, okay, that's a tragedy for the art, because now we're saying you can't even speak on things you used to do. You can't even speak on things people around you do. You can't tell a story that maybe helps your listeners if you're not being autobiographical. That's what I don't like on a creative side.
All I know is most marketers will tell you, like, authenticity is important, right? So I think, again, that's why we believe, like, I mean, I like music, more so R&B than anything else, but like I never was like I didn't realize what a fan was until we started Funk Volume. Like, I didn't realize that, like, people gravitated to music in such a way, because that it never played like that big of a part in my life. Like, I liked music, but like I didn't really care if I ever like got to meet the artist. Like, even if there was a meet and greet available, I'm like, what am I going to say to this person? I like their music, but I don't need to meet Boys to Men. Like, just sing. Like, I enjoy the music, but I didn't understand like how some fans, experience music differently, and the attachment was different. And maybe it was because of, they felt like they shared the same experience. So music is powerful for a lot. It moves them in a totally different way than me. Like, I just enjoy it. Like, I just, like working out to it, riding to it, things like that. So, music has a crazy impact on a lot of people, and I understand differently now.
That it does. And a lot of those fans, I think you would admit, Dame, given that you were the subject of one of Hopsin's songs, they believe the artist 100% what they say, and that's not always the case. I mean, the song About You, I only listened to 4 years after meeting you in person, and I was like, this is hilarious. This doesn't sound like Dame at all. But let the fans tell it. You're running around with a shake weight in one hand and Hopsin's, legacy money in the other hand. I'm like, nah, that didn't happen. Dame's not a thief. Dame's not he's not what. I've never seen him near a shake weight, and I've worked out with him. So that's kind of my point. The fans expect this realness. They expect, even if you feel authentic, no one knows who's authentic or not. And we're in a creative space, and so those lines get blurred, and I think that's fine. I think when we start trying to unblur the lines for specific reasons, that's where the trouble starts.
My advice would be don't tell on yourself. If you're doing stuff that's illegal,
well, yeah.
Stay off of Vlad. Don't put any real stuff in your music.
And hopefully, I don't know. I see why Andre 3000 made the Healing album, honestly, because I think, unfortunately, the demographic that latched onto the music out of all the generations of rap fans needed that Healing album maybe the least.
Right.
It's about who's
ones of us
receptive.
in therapy and who have lived through life who are like, ooh. I needed that. And everybody else is like, man, this ain't got no hitters.
You talk about the Flute album?
Yeah.
The Flute album is great. Like,
But that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. The ones of us who latched onto it probably needed it the least. It's us who have gone through therapy, us who exercise regularly, who don't drink a lot. It's like, it's the ones of us who are already in the healing process.
and leave that man alone. Like, I understand that fans love Andre. He's one of the best to ever do it. If he doesn't feel inspired to rap, like, leave him alone. Like, I learned that because I was a big fan of Kanye, and I learned that, like, look, if they're not doing what you came to love them for anymore, just stop being a fan. You can't dictate how an artist evolves, right? If they evolve into something that wasn't your expectation, you can't get mad at that. They got to evolve as a person, as an artist. I keep seeing people like say negative things about Andre, or even his perspective on rap now. He says that, I can't quote him exactly, but he was like, what am I going to rap about? Like getting a colonoscopy? Like, there are certain messages from his standpoint that he wants to deliver different ways. If he don't want to rap about the things that he's actually experiencing he's probably 50, right? I don't know how old he is. If there's things that he doesn't want to rap about, if he feels disconnected from, rap at this moment, like, leave it alone. I know that we want to hear more Andre. I want to hear more Andre verses, but we can't expect artists to develop the way we want them to develop, or they wouldn't be that artist. Like,
Well, and it's not like he quit rap. I mean, I think
He was just on
if
the
I were
Killer
in his
Mike
position,
album.
that's what I'm gonna say. And that was Grammy nominated. He's on the Killer Mike album. He's still every now and then will appear on a song that is, I guess, appealing enough to him, interesting enough to him, and so there's that. I just think once I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of someone that's so incredibly successful at doing one thing, a series of times. Because when you beat the odds, when you create, I thought Aquemini was going to be like the peak for Outkast because that album performed well commercially and received so much praise. Even though I thought I liked AT Aliens, the album, as much, if not more. But whatever. The fact is, then they came out and they kept evolving musically, and they came out with even more commercially successful albums that were, now breaking musical boundaries. After you do that and beat the odds so many times, there's got to be immense. I'm not saying that this is what Andre 3000 is feeling. I don't know him, but there's got to be a lot of pressure to perform and stay consistent with what you've set forth for yourself with all those previous successes. And then it's like, if you don't feel like you have much else to say or much else to innovate, what are you going to do? He's already done it.
I don't think he feels pressure at all. I just don't. I mean, and it pretty much said, like, I just don't, have something to rap about in that way. Like, there's not something that he wants to
He
say.
had said a couple years ago, because people were asking for the album, and he was like, I don't want to. He had said he was scared that it would flop or that he wouldn't be able to deliver up to the expectation that people have.
But I'm not sure. I didn't hear that. I'm just based off the interview that he just did. It didn't sound that it was a pressure thing. It just he just didn't feel compelled to deliver a message in the rap format currently. I didn't hear that it's a pressure thing. But just leave that man alone. There's so many dope artists that if I'm not trying to compare them to Andre, but there's amazing artists out there right now. And, get lost in some of that music, explore some new folks. And I feel like one day we will hear some more rap from Andre on his time, and he's going to say what he needs to say. But I don't think everybody has a right to their opinion, because I think Wayne commented he was a little disappointed in what Andre's outlook was. Wayne continues to deliver really dope verses because that's the space he's in, and he has more stuff to say. Um, so just let artists evolve how they want to evolve, in my opinion. And there's more than enough music out there right now. There's a great variety of music. You just have to, dig a little deeper. Like I said, it's like TJ Maxx or Ross. Like the good stuff is in there somewhere. You just don't know what rack. The extra large you're looking for might be in the small section. It's
I
like
was just there. You're not. That's not a lie.
it's sometimes you get some good stuff. You come up on a lot, and some stuff you get frustrated. Sometimes you go in there, get frustrated, and want to leave right away. But that to me, that's what the music industry right now is. It's like TJ Maxx, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just going to take a little more effort on the fans' part, to find the good stuff. So I mean, I grew up on TJ Maxx and Raw, so it's not necessarily a super negative thing because that's where I got all my clothes growing up. So, and that's where Aaron got paid the big bucks.
You
Oh
know what I'm
boy.
saying? 655 or 635, whatever I was making. It was crazy.
Well, speaking of low payments, next episode, I don't think we have time to cover it today, but next episode we will talk about the recoupment trap that some artists seem to be falling in, and it's much more complex than that. There's the story about Krayshawn, there's a story about Money Man, and they're talking about just not making the kind of money that they thought they were going to make. Well, the label pockets a lot, so we'll break that down. And once again, if you want free music distribution for 3 months, and it's $2.99 after that, $2.99 after that, check out Two Lost, twolost.com, use the code PAIN, and you will get that 3 free months. And then also there's a contest going on. Dame, do you want to remind them about that?
Yeah, real quick though, because I got to go to the bathroom. twolost.com/collab for the crown. Enter it, chance to win $20,000. We partnered up with T-Pain, make an original song with a collaborator. The song has to have an automotive or racing theme, but get more information at twolost.com/collab for the crown.
All right, and drop a comment criticizing Dame for needing to end the podcast early because he's a human and has to use the bathroom. That's terrible. That's awful. He's clearly an industry plant, and we will catch you in the next episode. Peace.
Peace.
Bye, y'all.
All right.